There's been a lot of speculation recently in terms of the relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and some speculation, about, are we going to see a warming of ties in the near future? Well, Israel was presented with what could have been a very serious situation this week when an airplane flying from the Seychelles back to Tel Aviv had to make an emergency landing in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And the seriousness of that, not only does Israel not have have ties with Saudi Arabia, but of course it is a dangerous place for Israeli citizens to be present in. So this was something which Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, thanked Saudi Arabia for allowing the plane to make an emergency landing. And they were able to stay in a hotel overnight and then continue their flight the next day back to Tel Aviv, and nothing happened. There was no incident, no consequences, and rightly so. Let's just put this into perspective. A plane of any nation with civilians on should be able to land safely under an emergency situation, or any situation for that matter, but should be able to land, and their citizens not come to any harm. Yeah. Do you think that this might break the ice in terms of relations, or do you think that there is still some way to go? I mean, we're not analysts in that sense, but I just wonder on whether or not this accidental, it's not accidental, it's unintentional situation which faced this, not just the plane, it faced Israel as a state in order to guarantee the safety of its civilians in Saudi Arabia this week. This might be one step towards improving ties.
Yeah, I think, it's always positive when you have something like this happen, I think. Even though it's not a big diplomatic thing that's happened, they're not announcing, diplomatic ties or anything, but it's at least friendship, edging towards friendship between two nations who are not currently friends. And so I think it is a positive. Obviously, Israel is looking to become, to have peace with Saudi Arabia. I think one of the reasons Netanyahu put out that video message was obviously to try and show that friendship and to be as friendly as he can be to them and to thank them. Yeah. And I think obviously they're trying diplomatically to make peace right now. There are talks, for listeners who don't know, there are talks between the US and Saudi Arabia and Israel as well, behind closed doors, where they are looking at what they can do for peace. In order to achieve peace, I think there would have to be some concessions on Israel's side. I know that Mahmoud Abbas is traveling to Saudi Arabia soon to basically lay down his demands for peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. So there's a lot of, it's very complicated.
Yes. Also, if I just add to that equation, Iranian leaders met with the leaders of Saudi Arabia, which was, I say unprecedented. In recent times, it was unprecedented, and also an indicator of, are those relations improving, and how problematic could that be to any future relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia? Or could it be a good thing? Because could that relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia, improve the situation with Iran? I doubt it. It might well backfire, but it's just interesting.
But it is very complicated because even when you mention Iran and Saudi Arabia are not friends. They are, even though they have some common grounds, common enemies, that sort of thing. Ultimately, Iran would like to control Mecca, and Saudi Arabia obviously controls Mecca. Iran is using the Houthis in Yemen to attack Saudi Arabia. It's actually, acting, it's actually carrying out a proxy war against Saudi Arabia as we speak.
Yeah.
And so, if there is a warming of ties between Iran and Saudi Arabia, maybe that will actually help to have a warming of ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. But I don't really know. I'm not sure I trust either of those countries, if I'm honest with you. But I would say in terms of what we have seen from the Abraham Accords, again, with countries that are not 100%, able to be trusted when it comes to Israel. They have had good fruits from those things. So I think if there could be peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel, I don't think it's going to be necessarily a negative thing for Israel. I think it would actually be a positive.
You're right about the Abraham Accords, Alex. I mean, those were a landmark achievement, and it is so good to see so many stories of Jews not only visiting the United Arab Emirates, for example, but really forming good ties as well as good, friendships, as well as good bilateral professional ties as well. And that is so wonderful. Yeah. I think it's still important, though. I think we need to remind ourselves that the safest place for the Jewish people in the Middle East is, of course, the state of Israel.
Yeah,
without
definitely.
any doubt and no question. I mean, the fact that we're even discussing the issue of Saudi officials having to guarantee the safety of Jews on a layover in Riyadh is indicator that it isn't a safe environment for Jews in most places in the Middle East, except for the state of Israel.
Yeah,
it re-emphasizes the importance of Israel.
100%. Yeah, I agree. There's 2 points I want to make on that. First of all, when you talk about the Middle East, and we were talking about the attitudes in the Middle East, one thing that we have seen from the Abraham Accords is actually as ties are mended between Israel and their neighbours, the anti-Semitism and the negative attitudes towards Israel lessen in the countries where there is peace. So the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and so forth, when they've now done surveys looking at anti-Semitic attitudes, actually they're more favourable to Israel now. So actually it's opening that door of, between the actual peoples with, reconciliation and so forth. And that might be because they're now able to go to Israel and visit. Yes. They're now able to meet with Israelis who are visiting them and so forth. So that's one thing. The other thing as well is, the second point I want to make is, you just said the state of Israel is the safest place for the Jewish people, and I completely agree. I mean, the Middle East is a hostile environment for the Jewish people, unfortunately. But it's also a hostile environment for many Christians. And Israel is not only the safest place for the Jewish people, it's also the safest place for Christians as well.
Yeah,
and that just proves, I mean, Israel is I would even say it's probably even the safest place for Muslims, because there's so many times where we hear about attacks from radical Islamic groups around the Middle East. Yeah. It's never reported in the news, but there are certain websites that track all the attacks that happen, and it's literally 100 a month that we never hear about over in the UK. And yet in Israel, those attacks against Muslims just don't happen, because Israel is secure and it's protecting its people. Obviously there are still issues within Israel, but it's a lot more secure.